Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Pash Hour. And today I have a special guest on with me. We have the winner of the very first Scottish Warhammer tournament, as well as the handsomest Australian in Scotland 2019. We have Mr. Chris Cousins. Hey, say hello, Chris.
G'day.
Good, eh? I like it. Straight into it. Chris,
I've
what's
got
your...
to play into the stereotypes.
I'm surprised you didn't come on with a didgeridoo and some sort of the hat with the corks.
Yeah, that would be cultural appropriation, so we don't want to do
We
that.
don't do that in 2025. No, that's fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, Chris. The one dying question I've been asking myself is, what's your favorite dice?
The one with the six on it.
Sorry, six on a one, or a symbol on the six, or symbol on the one?
A symbol on both, so that you can just decide what you've rolled
just,
when you.
just whatever. And you
Yeah,
have to speed roll them so that nobody can actually see what's going on.
exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Fair enough. Okay, so the reason I've got Chris on today is we have decided between us to fix Warhammer. We have all the solutions right here for our next event. So Chris and I have teamed up to put on a local event, a one-day event, to test out some new comp ideas, some new scenario bits and pieces. So what we wanted to do is just talk about it, see how that pans out, and yeah, basically get people's opinion as to what they think, whether this is a big improvement, a step in the right direction, or if we're completely not really wrong, which we're not. So we're confident we're definitely right on this. So
I
without
mean,
further ado,
we're recording it, so we can't
it,
afford to be wrong on the internet.
no. If it's on the internet, it must be correct. People know exactly what they're talking about when they're on the internet, of course, don't they? Okay, let's have a little look and see. So what we have here is a little comp pack that we put together for this event. The event is called Dragon's Grudge, and there's a reason. So, Chris? Is it the dragon that is holding the grudge, or is it the grudging of dragons, or whose grudge is it?
A grudge towards dragons, maybe. I think an appropriately ambiguous term, but I think at least some people are either uh, in love with dragons or maybe a bit sick of dragons when playing
Yeah,
the old world, and so definitely one of the iconic things to be grudging about or grumbling about.
100%.
Which, given that we're playing at the dwarf event or venue in Dunfermline, grumblings and grudges is definitely the vibe.
It is. I think it's a suitably ambiguous name for an event that may or may not favor dragons. I guess we'll see. So, the event itself, it's a one-day event. There's nothing overly untoward about that. But let's get down to the tasty bits and have a look at the army selection part. So
Oh,
it
there
is.
is one thing worth mentioning from the start bit,
Yep.
which is the tickets are still available. So if you'd like to come, please sign up.
There is a limited amount of spaces, but there are a couple of tickets still left. So yes, if you are free on Saturday the 29th of March and you're within driving distance of Dunfermline, please come along. We'd love to have you. Chris and I will be there. We'll be hashing out a few other new ideas, sitting in the corner quietly, laughing to ourselves manically. Um, but yeah, if you are available, please do come along. It's on BCP. We'll have the link in the description as usual. Come along and have a look at the compact, see what you think, give us some feedback. And just come along, try it out. There's nothing better than feedback after you've actually tried it out rather than a hot take reaction on the internet. But we are internet people, so I guess hot takes reaction is what we're all about. So let's crack on. So the army selection has been lovingly called the Aussie rules composition. Aussie rules for short. I wonder why. So what was the idea behind this, Chris? What because you basically we hashed out the composition between us, yes, but you were the instigator of it. So I think these were basically your ideas that I reined in as much as I could. But really, it was sort of tweaked from there. What was your original plan?
So the main plan is to call it Aussie Rules, despite the fact that it's not being played in Australia, to troll the entire Australian old world community
Sweet.
by having other people online refer to something as like the Australian rules that they've never even heard of. So far it's going really well. People seem to have referred to it as Aussie comp for a Scottish event, which is
Brilliant.
exactly the plan. If you mean what the plan was beyond just causing chaos. That's more to do with how the old world kind of works, which I think for people who've played other games without composition, without big variation between the rules that different tournaments are using, the more games you play over time, that can become a bit samey.
Yeah.
And we're just coming off the back in Scotland of an uncomped event run by an evil overlord who did not try to change the rules of the game at all. That was me at the
Green
Battle for
Hollow.
Green Hollow,
Yeah.
and there were a good variety of armies, but quite a lot of lists were starting to look fairly similar,
Yeah.
or not just to each other, but to things that you'd see at other events as well.
Yeah.
Uh, Now, people had their own spins on these things. The event was won by Charlie's Vampires, which
Mm.
was like a scream list. Charlie doesn't want to call it a scream list.
It
It's a
has
scream
it
list.
has 5 screams in it. It's a scream
Uh,
list.
like three or something, but it's got some innovation as well. Like
Yeah.
it's he's doing some things differently, but archetypally,
Yeah.
it's
It's a thing.
that's screaming. Exiles in second place again. Some twists.
Yeah.
Harrison had the hippogriff rather than a peg baron, but still again doing what exiles do.
Yeah.
And orcs and goblin gunline with like 3 level 4s in third place.
Yeah.
The sorts of things that you just see a lot of. And
Exactly.
if you've been playing as much old world as degenerates like us, maybe you're excited to play against some different looking armies and to use some different things yourself
Yeah.
while still feeling competitive. So the idea then is to rather than just appeal to people's better nature, to actually force them to be better people
Well,
by
that's
restrict.
that's a big stretch, but we can certainly try.
Yeah, so we've got this set of additional army selection restrictions
Yeah.
to not to like perfectly balance the game. There's still things that are going to be much better or worse under this set of composition restrictions.
Yeah.
But the idea is that the armies that people can take and what they want to take are going to at least look different.
Yeah.
Different units will be better and worse. Maybe different armies will be better and worse under these rules than a sort of normal no restriction approach.
Yeah.
And the things that were targeted were basically the things that are generally doing the best. Spending all your points on characters and flyers, repeating the same spells and items multiple times.
Yeah.
Basically trying to make those either impossible or harder to do so that there's a real incentive to play with some different toys.
Okay. Well, without further ado, let's go through the restrictions. So, because people are chomping at the bit, I'm sure, to try and find out exactly what we've restricted, what we've limited in Warhammer in our attempt to fix it. So, basically, the first major thing is the restriction on characters. So we said no more than 1/3 of your total points of your 2,000 points is to be spent on characters. 666, the evil number, we've set as the character limit. So of course that'll have big effects. You can take you can take a maxed out Chaos Lord, but you're not going to have anything else in there. You can take multiple level 4s, but again, you're probably not going to have anything else in there. It's going to be interesting to see what sort of effects that'll have on army lists going forward. I think you can still have some toys, but you can't have all the toys. That's sort of the idea behind that, I believe.
Yeah, and the part of the problem with lists starting to homogenize or be a bit similar is that it's so easy to take a dragon and a level 4 and then your minimum core and just a couple of copies of whatever your best rare unit is.
Yeah.
And you can start to see armies like High Elves and Chaos and Tomb Kings can have very similar looking armies, even though they're meant to be like very different.
Completely different, yeah, of course, of course.
Because they can just take all the same building blocks. Whereas when you can only take 1/3 of your points in characters, you're either going to have to take a much more vulnerable dragon in some cases, or in others, just have to choose between a wizard and a dragon at all.
Yeah,
and those are probably the two most powerful things in the old world. So only getting one of them would actually be a big sacrifice for most armies.
Unless you put a wizard on a dragon, I guess.
Yeah, but then I think in general those are the ones that are easier to deal with.
Yes.
By just taking them off the table.
They don't have the armor save. A lot of them don't have the toughness. They don't have the stacked saves. It's not the same beast, really, is it?
Yeah. Some of them also less toughness as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's something that forces decisions, and that was the whole idea behind this part of the comp, is essentially make difficult choices, decide what you want to do with your army, and sort of narrow it down in your character choice. Okay, fine. That's point number one. Number two, so no more than one third of your points may be spent on units with a fly special rule. Now, this includes mounted characters, and in addition, no units or mount options with a fly rule may be duplicated. So, what does that last part mean specifically?
It means that Bretonians can't wiggle around it by having a Royal Pegasus and a Barded Pegasus.
Yep.
That's the main thing there, r- rather than having a caveat that lets them kind of do what they want normally.
Yeah, yeah. The
Uh,
Bretonians are notoriously difficult to blanket comp because there's they don't really work the same way as other armies, and they do well regardless. So you want to make sure that you're sort of including things with that. But I guess for the Bretonian sort of flying peg circus, this is something that is really in place there to limit that a little bit more because a third, again, 666 points. If you include a character and you're not going to get a huge amount of peg knights or multiple peg knight units, are you, with this? So that's
I think you can still get. Again, thinking of like the filthiest things you can do, I think you can still get like 5 Pegasus Knights with the Vanguard banner and a fully kitted out Baron on a Pegasus.
yep,
But you just don't then have a second Baron on a Pegasus and
exactly,
another unit of Pegasus Knights.
exactly. Yeah, it limits what you have, and maybe it forces those armies to be a bit more um, in theme with actually going on horses rather than
Mm.
flying horse flying horse Pegasus things.
And
Um,
it's not just Bretonians that runs into this as well. Like Warriors of Chaos can't take a character dragon
yep,
and a Warpfire dragon, which
yep,
is one of the first things I was thinking of. High Elves can potentially run into some problems as well if they
yep.
try to take
Dragons, Griffin, Phoenix, the flying.
Stormcutters.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
There is a limitation on that, and I think in general, Fly is just the most powerful and in
yeah.
some cases unreasonable rule in the game, uh, and so making that another point of like
Limitation.
another
Yeah.
pinch point. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, fly is in a game of maneuverability. Fly is the best rule. The second best rule is probably skirmishing fly, where you can charge 360, and armies that have both will dominate, especially if they can hit hard. Okay, fine.
yeah,
Well, that totally makes sense. I think that's a good restriction, obviously, because we put them in there. So let's see what this happens. Okay, so the next one that we have is no rare units may be duplicated. Okay, so this rare units that can also be core units or can be taken in other categories as well. So that includes, your Necrosphinxes, your Sisters of Avalorn, Terrorgheists, bits and pieces like that. And I guess the idea behind that is sort of in theme to keep rare as rare and those units because they are the good units, aren't they? Like the rare units are
yeah,
often some of the better units that you have in your army, and the idea there is to keep them sort of in check a little bit. Am I right?
yeah, and also to sort of force people into different army builds than they might normally do.
Hmm.
The number of lists that are double Necrosphinx, double Casket, double Bombard, double
Yeah.
Doom Diver, double Mangler. Uh, that again, thinking of how lists end up in the sort of spot that they do,
Yeah.
when you've only got you spend your points on characters, minimum core, and then the rest of your points, taking as many copies of your best rare units
Exactly.
seems to that seems to be what a lot of armies do. And for someone who likes spending all their time writing lists rather than actually playing the game, like me, um, having more restrictions and hoops to jump through is an interesting puzzle to try to solve.
I think so. Like you say, if you have a good rare unit, taking two of it is going to be good, just inevitably. So trying to sort of limit that a little bit more, and see what people come up with. A lot of this is really just let's throw some ideas together on a composition list and see what people come up with, see how people try and break the game. And since we released this, there's been a lot of buzz about it. The Aussie comp has been quite excited. There's been a lot of people trying to sort of break it and try and
Mm-hmm.
come up with broken lists and stuff, and it's been interesting to see that experiment. Okay, well, let's follow through. We have the next part is no more than one third of your unit strength can be in one unit. So this is a list construction limitation. It's not
Mm-hmm.
a put stuff into units limitation, and that's really just a Death Star sort of limit there, isn't it?
Yeah, people who would take an army that is 120 night goblins or 160 skeletons with a poison banner.
Yeah.
Uh, that's probably not something people are excited to play against when they turn up to a tournament.
No.
So maybe under our rules, you just can't.
Yeah, and I think the other point that's interesting about it is it's a limitation on unit strength, not points. So that's slightly different because most of the time when you see limitations, it's no more than a third of your points or something in one unit, but it's your unit strength which changes because what people tend to do is that big Death Star will have a high unit strength. So you need to be careful about where you put the rest of your points as well. So again, it's just another thing to improve the quality of the game to try and make it a little bit more fun,
Yeah,
and to stop these sort of non-interesting games, basically.
yeah,
Okay, the next one's a bit controversial, I think. In fact, the next couple are controversial. Rulebook magic lores may not be duplicated. This is a restriction that does not apply to bound spells. So if you have Ruby Ring of Ruin, you can have another Fireball. If you have Ring of Fury, you can have another Hammer Hand. If you have any of these cool little bound items, you're fine. That's not restricted. But you cannot have more than one wizard on the same lore,
yep,
basically. Yeah. So that's to stop the sort of like double necromancy spam, the sort of super fireball, 5 pillars of fire, which okay is not quite as possible anymore. But it's all of this shenanigans basically. That's the idea behind that. Am I right?
yeah. And part of that is it's more interesting to have lots of different spells, I think. But from a sort of power level viewpoint,
Hmm.
Taking lots of copies of the same spells is always designed to make the game less interactive.
Yeah.
You're trying to guarantee dropping people's leadership and screaming all their stuff off or killing it with caskets.
Yep.
You're trying to guarantee forcing through 2 or 3 pillars of fire and doing the silly pillars of fire things that we know and love.
Yeah.
So now you can't.
Now you can't. So we've taken more fun stuff away for you. Excellent. People are gonna love
Yeah.
this.
Although one thing to bear in mind as well is nothing is actually like banned or outlawed
Yeah.
or not able to be taken at all.
No, that's
Uh,
true. So
so
it's not banning things, it's limiting things. That's what it's about.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can still take 3 level 4s, but they're just going to have to all be on different laws.
Yeah.
You can still take, you can still take big flyers, but you just can't also take lots of other flyers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what one thing I tried to do, and we'll see this a little bit more in a moment, is to not take anything out of the game,
Yeah.
but make people put the pieces together in ways that might be less powerful and hopefully more fun to play with and against.
Yeah. And I think part of that will the other half of this is really the scenarios that are in the event. But we'll go through the composition rules first, and then we'll get onto the scenarios. Now, the next bit I also think is a bit controversial. No magic items count as extremely common. So that means there's no Warriors of Chaos spell familiars for everybody. There's no Seeds of Rebirth for all the high elves. There's no none of these really common items that people love. All your champions can't have charm shields. Basically, it's a one-off restriction, isn't it? It means that every item that you take there's only one off, which is what we've had before. Like it's not a completely groundbreaking idea, but it is new to Old World, I think. I'm interested to see how this one is affected. Do you think it'll affect a lot of armies?
I think it definitely will change a lot of the character builds that people go for,
Mm.
but in ways that I think are probably good.
Mm.
Your Chaos Army can't have like 6 favors of the gods to just always be rolling and never have to risk
Yeah,
anything.
good point.
If
Yep,
you
yep.
want an Infernal Puppet, you can't get a spell familiar as well. So there is like a
Yeah,
real trade off between different items. Your Black Orc, Black Orc can still probably end up with a 2-up armor save on a Wyvern, but you're not going to be able to take Seed of Rebirth and a Talisman of Protection. You'll have to choose one or the other.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, again, there'll be ways around this, and some armies might get hit harder by this than others.
yeah,
But I don't think that getting to spam copies of the same item or
yeah,
stack up the same kind of item, for the most part, is particularly fun.
yeah. I
Uh,
agree. Yeah, I think, and it there's a theme here really, which is duplication. Like basically spamming the same good thing is not like you're going to create a less balanced sort of game, aren't you? If you're going to have multiple of the same item, if you're going to have multiple lures, if you're going to have multiple rares, multiple sort of mounted characters and things like that, it's restricting the ability to find the good item in your army book and just take as much of it as you can possibly take. And it's just sort of forcing you to think a little bit differently about army composition and how you build your lists.
Yeah, and there's also some armies that massively benefit from having particular items as
Yeah.
being extremely common. That it's, in a way a little bit unfair that, or it might seem a bit unfair that other armies don't. Why do Warriors of Chaos get to have all of their wizards with an extra spell
Oh,
and
I hate
another
that.
arcane item?
Ah, yeah,
Um,
it's so
wh-
painful. When I so I play Warriors of Chaos and Hiles. Hiles is my primary faction really, but I did flirt with Warriors of Chaos for quite a while, and I loved the spell familiar. And then I've gone back to playing Hiles, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can just have extra spells on all my wizards. Oh no, wait, it's not super common, and it's not dead cheap. Yeah, it's funny how there's an imbalance between different army lists of these sort of similar abilities. It's very
yeah,
strange. Very
and
strange.
so this is the sort of overall like big picture composition restrictions. And I guess something else worth saying is that this
Mm.
is the first time that we've run a tournament with this set or style of restrictions.
Yep.
And it's not a first draft, but it's also something that can and will change over time.
Yeah,
We
it'll
might
improve.
find that some of these restrictions aren't needed. We might find that there are some that we've missed that might lead to just some
Yeah.
armies being either like super obnoxious, or maybe we're preventing people from doing things that actually it's fine for them to be doing.
Yeah.
So scope to change things in the future,
Yeah.
but at least I haven't yet seen much that can get through this set of restrictions
Mm.
that looks exactly like the kind of armies that maybe we're getting a little bit tired of playing against over and over again.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what people come up with. And one of the things is you can theory craft this sort of composition in your head for hundreds and hundreds of hours until you actually run it through a tournament, get people to essentially test out the comp. You don't really know how good or bad it is. I'm sure we'll get lots of comments about people saying this is absolutely the worst thing in the world, or oh my god, this is amazing. Um, Probably more the first than the latter because people like to react. But I think you your opinion holds more weight once you've played with it than it is when you just theorycraft it and go, it's good or bad. Like you don't really you need to play with it in order to, you need to suck it and see. You need to see how it turns out. All right, let's finish off the army compositions because the last little bit is a few bits that we sort of specifically highlighted as we would like to limit the restriction basically, and these are army specific ones. The first one, the Green Knight. So the Green Knight and the Falcon Horn may only be taken in the Errantry Crusade list. Errantry Crusade list is played, but it's the least played of the three, and it's probably because it has a few inbuilt issues with, everything being impetuous pretty much, and wizards being a little bit different. So I think the Green Knight is, everybody knows the Green Knight's a great piece. Falcon Horn is also a bit of a rock paper scissors type piece. And if you just restrict those to Errantry Crusade, I think that's quite good because it essentially it boosts that army choice, but also means that if you really want those items, you're gonna have to put some sacrifices in. Am I right?
Yeah, this is fitting in with the philosophy of not banning anything, but also not giving people super obvious options that are really strong.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever seen an Bretonian Exiles list that doesn't take the Falcon Horn.
yeah,
It's kind of ridiculous that you can get a reroll on it for free
yeah,
uh, in playing with uncomped. If you really love the Falcon Horn, you really want to mess with people's flyers,
yeah.
you can do it, but there's a price to pay,
Exactly,
which is having to play the errantry list, which is probably not what you were already playing.
exactly. That's true. The next part is the Infernal Puppet. Everybody loves the Infernal Puppet. You love it or hate it, but this one can only be taken in Heralds of Darkness list. Now, Heralds of Darkness is not that much weaker than the standard Chaos list, but it is weaker, and primarily I think because of the 33% core.
But
That's one of the
yeah,
main issues. So it's kind of nice to give that little boost. I see this as a boost to Heralds of Darkness, but also if you want that item, which is a great item, you're gonna need to build your list a little bit differently. You're gonna need to probably go for a slightly different, rather than a cookie cutter sort of foot slogging slash dragon build that you would normally see in Warriors. So yeah, that totally makes sense to me. I think that's a good one. Next one is a couple of poison restrictions. Amulet of the Serpent, that's Tomb King item that can only be taken in the Grand Army. Now, that's the one where we've seen 100 plus skeletons in one unit, being able to poison the hell out of everything. You can still make a very nasty big poison block with that, but it's not mortuary cult. It's not it's not the royal host, which can do some other crazy things as well. So I think combination of all those rules makes that quite a nasty item, but limiting it to just Grand Army, probably fairly fair, I would say.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we've also limited the number of models you can put into a single unit,
Yeah.
I think that there's like two things that are working in combination. One is you can't just put all of your points into one unit and
Mm.
force people to engage with the ridiculous Death Star you've created,
Yeah.
because you'll have to have at least a chunk of your unit strength outside so they can go pick up some points,
Mm.
and maybe you're actually going to have to make the big block work for you.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of like health of the game kind of thing I have in mind.
Yeah.
But then there's also just uh, the not very fun factor of having a giant or a phoenix
Yeah.
or like some large target that just cops like 60 or 70 poison shots a turn,
Yeah.
because for 25 points you can give poison to
The
an
whole
entire
army.
unit super
Yeah,
easily.
basically. Yeah. It's
You can
it's a bit
still do
silly.
it, but you won't be able to do it in the most optimal ways.
Yeah. And that's really what it is. It's about removing the being able to do it in the most optimal way. It's being able to you can still do these things, but we sort of are starting to figure out what the most optimal way of doing of fielding certain units is of certain character builds, and it's about restricting those to say, okay, if you want A, you can't then also have B and C and D. Like you need to compromise somewhere. Maybe that's what comp really is. It's compromising rather than composition. But yeah,
For competitive play.
yes, on the compute. Oh, it's on the tabletop. All right, okay, never mind. Okay, and the last one is just the Spider Fang banner, which is another poison banner.
Mhm.
In the Troll Hordes. I don't even know what unit you'd have it on in the Troll Horde, but
Common
oh,
goblins.
you can have it in Common Goblins. Ah, interesting. Surely that is a good thing. Common Goblins sounds like something that would have poison. You know,
Hmm.
dirty, nasty little goblins running around. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
great.
mean, another fun way to do this would be to say that, just that night goblins can't take the Spider Fang banner. That would have
Yeah,
a similar kind of effect.
yeah.
So if you want a big poison block, it's not going to be night goblins, which is worse.
It's gonna have to be. It's gonna have to be something. It's gonna have to be something that's like on a big block of spider riders or something.
Yeah,
Okay.
but yeah. So that's the sort of army composition restriction setup that we've gone with,
Yeah.
and yeah, hopefully we've managed to explain the sort of rationale behind that.
Hmm.
We haven't made any changes to how things play on the tabletop. Like once you've
No,
written
no
your
rule
list,
changes. Yeah, that's true.
yeah, once you've written your list, your units would work exactly the same on this table as anywhere else.
Yeah.
So the restrictions and the kind of changes to people's armies
Hmm.
is is all in the list construction phase, and that means that you could play a list under this composition against anyone else's list for any other tournament,
Yeah.
and not have like weirdness with
How do you
units
play
working
this? How do you play that? Oh,
differently.
what happens when you have the Green Knight? Yeah, yeah. There's no.
Yeah, my dragon has only a 4+ save at
Yeah,
this event, but a different save at a different one. Like,
yeah. I think that's something that differs from one tournament to another. Is you're starting to see different people play with almost a slightly tweaked version of the game. Oh, how does this item work under this composition, or under this tournament, or how did this item work under this tournament? And I think as somebody who doesn't, if you don't play an awful lot, it can be quite confusing as to, oh, I didn't know this wasn't the case, or I didn't know this works this way. But also, if you're somebody who plays a lot, it can be like, oh, wait, is this the event that this is being used like this? Is this the event where TMP is within 12 or anything within 12? Like, it's all of these little things. So I am obviously a fan of that. I think it's good to try and keep as homogenous to the sort of core game as it is, while answering any questions that people have. and then hopefully, but I'm also up for trying new things. But what we tried to do for this one is to keep the core rules the same, but change the way that you build your army and the way that you play the game, in terms of what you're trying to achieve. And that sort of leads us on to the next bit. So, Games Workshop have recently released a couple of nice little scenarios, and one of them is called Upon Shrouded Shores. It's a funky little scenario. It's not too different from an open battle in the sense that you have the same sort of deployment that you normally have, but it does introduce a couple of objective markers, one for the defenders and two for the attackers. Um, if you haven't played the scenario so far, to be honest, what it sort of boils down to is essentially controlling these objectives. At the end of each turn, each player turn, you get victory points based on the which objective you hold. In order to hold an objective, you need to be a core unit. You have to be within 6 inches and have a unit strength of 10 or more. That's also not fleeing, etc. So you and I have played this game, this scenario, a couple of times, and what? Why did? Remind me again why we included it.
So at least from my perspective, that was to try it out,
Yeah,
and to. From reading through it, I liked what it was trying to do.
yeah.
It rewards core units, which is currently for most armies not something that
It's
is.
a tax, isn't
Uh,
it? Yeah,
yeah. Now this gives your core units something really worthwhile to do in the game.
yeah,
There's like up to 2,400 victory points available from objectives,
yeah. It's
which is
big.
more than I realized.
It's
Like
it's
it,
actually a lot. Yeah,
now it is really hard to get your opponent, like get control of your opponent's objectives while also controlling your own.
yeah,
But that leads to core units being really important in a way that they aren't normally, and uh, because there are objectives, it lends to a more maneuvering style of game where your positioning matters a
yeah,
huge amount, more so than perhaps creating your sort of machine that removes people's models.
yeah,
Uh, you're rewarded for doing that still, but you want to do both.
yeah.
You need to be controlling the battlefield and taking people's toys off.
Exactly. And for those people who are like, oh, but what if in my game I'm the defender, the defenders have an advantage, so ultimately from round one, if I get paired into the opposite side, then I suck and I lose the whole tournament. What solution have we put in place for that?
So in round 1 and 2, we'll be playing this scenario. If you're the defender in round 1, you'll be the attacker in round 2. So everyone plays the scenario from both sides.
Yeah,
I don't think there's a huge, at least so far, I don't think there's a huge difference between being the attacker or defender.
yeah.
Maybe the defender has a bit of an advantage because they're just like
One
defending
objective.
1 point
Yeah,
rather than 2.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it would be too bad just to randomly decide who's which.
Yeah.
But nicer if everyone has to play both sides of it. I
I
think.
agree. I think in order for everybody to get a better understanding of how this scenario works, and just to keep it fair, it would make sense that everybody gets a turn of being a defender and the attacker. I don't think the difference between the two is large. Having played this scenario, I think, yeah, defender has like a small advantage again because they're only defending 1 point. Um, but it's not massive. I think the biggest difference is actually that ability. It's how you score those victory points. It's through core units of unit strength 10 or more, and that's the bit that will be different to a lot of people because they'll have the core, like you say. It's been a pretty abysmal thing in most armies that they take sort of a minimum of it. You don't really see people taking any great points in core unless your army is building a Death Star or something. Um, but I think in this scenario, having core units being the only thing that can capture, I think that's going to make a difference. And I'm keen to see what people think. It's a step in the right direction. It's using objectives for the purposes of scoring victory points. So that is our scenario number one. That is our scenario number two. What are we doing for scenario number three?
So scenario number 3, we're doing the best and most fun and excellent of the rulebook scenarios, which is open battle. I am a strong believer that all of the other rulebook scenarios are worse than just playing open battle as they're written.
Fair.
You can certainly tweak them
Yeah.
to avoid those problems, but we are in fact even tweaking open battle by taking those objectives from the previous scenario and putting them onto the center line for people to scrap over in the last game.
Exactly. So basically, the third one is going to be sort of very similar. You'll have the objective markers just in the middle. So hopefully, it'll bring everybody sort of with a big clash in the middle, and there's lots of fighting for points on that part as well. So it is three objective-based scenarios. It's something different. It's not the usual just kill everything type of point scenario. So yeah, it is something different. It's hopefully that's going to make a change. Okay,
Yeah.
so the next part that we have tweaked is the victory points modification. It's not quite as per the rulebook. It's a bit more generous towards being able to score partial points, I think. So I'll start off from the top. So units reduced to half or less of their starting unit strength are worth 50% of their victory points. That's different to the rulebook where you have to be under 25% in order to give 25%. So it should hopefully mean that decimated units start to give out victory points a little bit earlier. Units fleeing at the end of the game are worth 50% of the victory points. And the next point is units reduced to half or less of their starting unit strength and fleeing are worth 75%. So there's a little bit of stacking there in terms of how victory points. So that hopefully means that in your last turn, if you decide to flee with a unit, you're going to be giving up most of the points cost for that unit if you flee a charge or something. Characters and monsters reduced to half or less of their starting wounds are worth 50% of their victory points. So this is a big change from the sort of core rules of how you score victory points. I have seen some rules packs do it differently, but for us, we've decided to half or less. That means if you take your, super unkillable dragon, if you manage to get it to half wounds, for Chaos Dragon that's 5 wounds, you now suddenly get a lot of victory points for it, which I think is really going to be, it's going to make dragons a little bit less of a big swing as they have been so far. A couple of other bits: units destroyed or fled off the table worth 100% of the victory points. That's normal. General has fled or destroyed as 100 points. The standards are worth 25 victory points. The battle standard is worth 100. The battle standard being worth 100 is normal. The small reduction in the bonus victory points for standards, I think, is really just to encourage people to take standards because we don't see them often enough because people are afraid of giving up those 50 victory points, aren't they? So I think, yeah, having 25 seems pretty nice. And then obviously your bonus points for your objectives. Now, we had to think about this, and basically it's likely that there's going to be a lot more points on the table for people to win. So we've made a slightly different victory point differential table. So is this a win-loss draw? Is this a 20-0 system? What's the idea behind this?
So this is not 20-0. We are in fact going up to 25.
25 nil.
Yeah, so you can actually win. You can win more in this system than in
Exactly.
any other.
Okay, so what's the difference between this and the standard win-loss draw 20-0 system?
So I think there are pros and cons to doing both a 20-0 and a standard win-loss draw system. With win-loss draw, the player who wins all of their games will probably win the event. But the trade-off there is that losing one game means you can't win the event. Losing two means you probably can't podium, and it can make the margins of victory mean a lot less.
Yeah.
As long as you scrape over the line into a win, that's all you need to do. As soon as you're going to lose a game, there's much less to play for. Whereas a 20-0 system means that a hard-fought loss is still worth quite a bit to you in the overall scheme of things.
Yeah.
So they incentivize different things, and this victory points table is trying to capture some of the strengths of both of those. So you have still a sort of an effective draw bracket where if the victory points difference is less than 100, so like a normal draw, both players basically get the same points. Yeah. We're giving one bonus point to someone getting slightly more victory points, but that's effectively a draw. Both players get the same.
Yeah.
But once you creep into the win bracket in a sort of win-loss draw system, rather than that ticking over to just 1 point of difference between the players, like an 11-9 in a 20-0 system, as soon as you tick over the win bracket, there's actually a fairly big gap between a win and a loss.
Mm.
Instead of it just being 2 points of difference between the winner and the loser, on this system it's like 9 points difference between the two.
Yeah.
So winning means more. It's going to be much harder to win the tournament if you lose a game than in a 20-0 system, but still not impossible. And just there's still a decent number of points on the line for people who make a hard fought close loss.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing now that I've discovered how many scenario points are available, maybe this actually needs to go up to like 28 or something, because people could be winning by like 4,000 points.
Yeah.
That's certainly possible. So maybe there's some scope to mess around with the top end of the scale. But I think the main difference between this and a 20-0 system is at that bottom end, where it is not fully melding this with a win-loss draw, but getting at least some of the benefits out of it. Winning your game even by a little bit is worth worth quite a bit more than a draw and a loss. Whereas in a 20-0 system, the difference can often be pretty minimal.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really the jump there between scoring less than 100 points difference and scoring over 100 points difference, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's where the first sort of that's where the jump is. If you notice that the it goes from sort of a 12-12, 13-12 to a 17-8 once you get the over 100 point differential. So yeah, like you say, this is essentially the best of both worlds. Best of win-loss draw,
Hopefully.
best of the 20-0 system. It doesn't put you out of contention if you lose a game and if you sort of in that sort of like small differential point. But it also means that if you have gone undefeated, there's a good chance you're really up there. And if you haven't won the event, it's because all of your games have been very, very close. Well, somebody else who has won might have won their games 4,000 points each one, and maybe they deserve to win as well. So I'm interested to see how this goes. This is an experiment. This is new. This is different. Aussie comp victory points 25-0 system. Yeah, I like it. I think it's going to be controversial. And it's new. People aren't used to that, so I guess we'll have a little look and see how it goes.
Yeah, in a way, I feel like this should maybe be the least controversial part of the pack, because
Probably.
like a 20-0 system is already a sort of ideological abstraction or like change from the game to say we want to incentivize certain different things, and this is just slightly changing the brackets, but in a maybe more deliberate way than just choosing between a regular 20-0 and a win-loss draw.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think it's going to be interesting. And that's pretty much it. That's there's nothing much more exciting there. There's a few things about who's going to win and who's going to how we do the victory points, how we do the awards, etc. But overall, this is it. This is Dragon's Grudge. This is our event that we're hosting on the 29th of March. A single one-dayer in Dunfermline. Come along, find out about it. Try play with the comp pack. See what armies you come up with. See what your feedback is. We are keen to hear how you get on and whether this is the way to fix Warhammer. Maybe it's not the final patch to Warhammer, but maybe it's a step in the right direction. And maybe this is just the first part of an evolving way that we're going to, play our game. So I'm definitely very excited to see how it goes. Chris, thank you very much for coming along. I very much appreciate your time today.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much to everybody who's listens. As usual, please subscribe, like, share it with your friends. We really do need those subs. We'll share the compact notes in the description. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you at Dragon's Grudge. All the best. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.